All right, here we are, class number 5 on our series leadership classes here at the Blue Ridge Baptist Bible College. How you doing? Good to have you. Pull up a chair, students. Get ready. We're going to take you on a crash course of leadership. Looking forward to tonight's class. We trust this is going to be a blessing to you. We're going to look at the leadership style of the Lord Jesus. So that ought to be exciting. It's actually just going to be our introduction really into his leadership style. We're going to spend some time here, and it goes right along with the law of addition in chapter number 5. So we got a lot to be covering, a lot to talk about here. I've got a few more books that I'm going to throw out at you for your reading pleasure if you're a bookworm. And readers are leaders. That's a fact. I'm passionate about this leadership class because I'm satisfied that the skill sets necessary to become a good leader are also the same skill sets that are necessary to have a successful life. So learn to lead, learn to live, and learn to be successful. Never too late to learn some key leadership traits and how to put some of these things into play. What we're going to talk about tonight is the linchpin of it. We've mentioned it several times already, but hopefully we're going to start bringing some of it together. We've talked about several different Bible characters, their leadership styles. Moses and David come to mind right off the bat. I'm hoping before this class is over to be able to explore a little bit the leadership style of Nehemiah. I'd also love to talk about Joshua and how Joshua took over and how he led in the wake of the death of Israel's great leader Moses. So there's a lot of characters to talk about, but what we're going to start dealing with tonight is the leadership style of the Lord, and that is servant leadership. This is going to be an introduction tonight, a little bit to servant leadership. Probably might even spend 2 nights on this. I don't know, the law of solid ground is next. That'll go along with our servant leadership. Servant leadership is something that's fairly a relatively new idea. It's in modern, I guess I should say it's relative new terminology. Obviously, it's not that new of an idea. It was the Lord's leadership style. It just took a long time for the world to catch on. You look back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, leaders, the majority of leaders were leaders on their title. They didn't feel like they had to have any deeper understanding than that. They felt like the boss to boss you around, tell you what to do. That was leadership. But as we'll see, the leadership style of the Lord, his leadership style was a style that had him serving others. And some of your most successful companies on the planet right now follow after the leadership style of the Lord in this idea of servant leadership. We find the idea for it in Matthew chapter number 20 and verse number 28. The Bible said, even as the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister and to give his life a ransom for many. So Jesus saw himself as being someone who came to be a minister, not to be ministered unto. Now, no doubt he's the leader. He's the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, and yet his leadership style among his disciples were to be their servant. Thinking about him girding himself and washing their feet at the Last Supper. It kind of gives you an idea of the leadership style of our Lord. It goes along good with chapter 5, the law of addition. Hope you're reading your book. It's fantastic. John Maxwell stuff, of course, is always great. But it deals with leaders adding value to others. Now, John Maxwell is big on that terminology, adding value. It's not about you. In the area of communication, it'd be good if preachers could remember that. A lot of times the biggest flops I've ever made in preaching is when I walked into the church and walked up onto the platform and the message was about me. Boy, that's a flop. It's not about you. You've got to have the attitude. If you have a desire to improve the life of others, you'll be a success. And that's the gauge of our success, is how much it helped others. It's the gauge of our preaching. How much did it help others? How much of an investment did you make in the lives of someone else? And so life is about serving others. Leadership's about serving others. It's about putting people first. I've heard people say, I've heard preachers say, well, I don't like people. Well, you're in the wrong business. I doubt you're called. You're probably not called to preach. You probably ought to do something else. Because when God calls a man to preach, he equips him, gives him a love for people and a desire to add value to the lives of other people. He's got a desire to want to help people and a desire to make a difference in people's lives. He points that out, Maxwell does, on page 55 of your book, if you're following along, where he talks about motives matter. Why do leaders lead? Some, he points out, just want to be in charge. You've probably worked for some people like that. They enjoyed the title. They enjoyed telling other people what to do. They were not a leader that you felt comfortable around. They were not a leader that empowered you. They were not a leader that made you feel good about yourself. They weren't much of a leader. Quite frankly, they just were in charge. They were a manager. Now, I wrote down a quote out of a book that I was reading. Let me bring it up so I get it correct, that I thought was good to this end. And it says, you cannot manage an organization out of a crisis. That requires leadership. So some people are good at managing. They can put together the numbers and the figures and put the people in the right place and make sure that schedules are kept and yada, 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 yada. They're managers. But when a crisis comes, you cannot manage your way out of a crisis. You have to lead your way out. And that's what we're talking about a little bit here tonight. So for some people, it was just being in charge. For others, they wanted to make the organization run smoothly. Again, that's a manager's mindset. They wanted to make money for the shareholders. They wanted to build a great company, make his organization better than the competition, win. That's the reason. But in actuality, the real reason that people ought to want to get into leadership is to help other people. And so he begins to delve into that. You can read, I'm not going to read all this to you, but it says, many people view leadership the same way they view success, hoping to go as far as they can, climb the ladder, achieve the highest position possible for someone with their talent. But contrary to conventional thinking, I believe the bottom line in leadership isn't how far we advance ourselves, but how far we advance others. And that is so very true. And he asked the question, are you making things better for the people who follow you? And so if you're in current leadership position, those of you that are watching, that are in our classes, that are pastors, are you investing in the lives of your people? If you're a Sunday school teacher, do you invest in the lives of those Sunday school students? Are they better? If you're a mom, are you investing in the lives of your children? Are they better? Are you leading in that way that you are enriching their lives, that you're, as Maxwell would say, adding value? 90%, he says, of people remove value from without it, and it's unintentional. They don't even mean to, but they suck the air out of the room. In contrast, 90% of all the people who add value do it intentionally. So if you're going to be one of those people that helps others, you're not going to do that by accident. You're going to have to do it intentionally. Then he starts talking about the servant's mindset. He says, as a leader, your best place in the organization is where you can serve others best. Man, that is so true. And he gives 3 or 4 things here that he deems, actually 3 things that he deems as essential to adding value. Number 1 is to truly value others. Becoming a leader means to give up our right to think of ourselves first. And so you always got to think about the good of the organization. You got to make yourselves valuable to others. The whole idea of adding value is to other people depends on the idea that you have something of value to add. So you have to, preaching for instance, if you're going to add value in your message, then you have to have studied and prayed and got something worth them hearing, something that is going to add value to their lives. And then he talks about know and relate to what others value. Mature leaders listen, learn, and then lead. For years, I handled things like a bull in a china shop. And a lot of times that's not the greatest leadership style. So let's talk about this idea of servant leadership. I'll give you some ideals that I believe will be a help to you. Let me give you another book. I don't really know if anybody listening in this class is interested at all in furthering their education about leadership. You may just think, man, if I can just get through this class, this particular class don't have a whole lot of Bible. It's more leadership styles, general ideas, pulling things from the scriptures as far as leadership is concerned. In other words, you may not be interested in this all. Others of you may be like me and eat it up. I eat it up. I love to read about presidents. I love to read about different folks that were in leadership positions, how they led, how they communicated. I love it. So if you love it like I do, a book that I've been reading right now is entitled Leaders Eat Last. It comes from an old Marine axiom. The Marine Corps coined that phrase a long time ago, that leaders eat last. And it's true in the Marine Corps, and this may surprise you, but when Marines sit down for chow, the lowest ranking eat first. And actually, whoever the highest ranking is in the chow hall, he always eats last. So leaders eat last. It was an axiom that I learned some years ago when I was trying to learn this idea of servant leadership. And it's one of the first things that I started putting into practice. Because when you have a dinner, now this is just a little advice here. Used to, when I had dinner, they'd say, all right, preacher, you go first. You and your family, get in there and go first. Well, that's a blessing. And we would, buddy, and we'd get all the best stuff, parade around like king and queen. I heard this idea of leaders eat last, and I started implementing it. When we'd have a dinner, I always try to mill around and make sure if everybody's got what they need, see if I can help them in any way. And then once the line dies down, I'll go through there and eat the chicken necks and wings, whatever's left over after it's been picked on. That's not to boost me up. That's just something I started implementing, and it puts you, when you do something like that, it starts putting you in the proper frame of mind as a servant leader. Now, are preachers worthy of double honor? Sure. This book right here says they are. I believe a preacher is worthy of double honor. Matter of fact, I would go as far as to say I believe that a church should try to average out what the median income is for their church and try to double the salary of the preacher to that median income. That'd be double honor. But I think they're worthy of double honor. I love God's men. I think that folks should have respect around them. Matter of fact, I think they should respect them more. But at the same time, if the Independent Baptist movement has a fault, it's that we elevate men to a level that's impossible for them to live up to, and it's unhealthy. It's a form of preacher religion, and a lot of times the preachers themselves, men and ladies, are guilty. Not that ladies can be preachers. I'm talking about y'all, men. I said men and then ladies because I also have ladies in the class. Maybe I didn't need to explain that, but I did. Anyway, sometimes preachers are guilty for elevating themselves. And we've got to remember that we are servants. And so in this book, Servants Eat Last, he starts laying out several things. It's a book about the business world. He starts laying out several ideas about servant leadership, and he gives an illustration that is really good of some Marines who were in battle during Afghanistan. Way above them is an A-10 Warthog. It's way up here above the clouds. This low cloud cover night. The Marines start taking fire. They call out soldiers in contact. That A-10 Warthog dips down below the clouds and starts putting down suppressing fire, killing the enemy. And he says that's a perfect example of what you need in a leadership and with a team. The team responded to the A-10. That's good fire. They were backing one another up on the ground, engaging the enemy, and they won the fight. Leaders give, like that A-10 Warthog, they should give cover from above. Our people should never feel adversarial to us. They ought to always feel like we're on their side. They ought to always feel like that we've got their best interest in mind. Now, are we going to have to bust hides sometimes and deal with problems? Sure. I'm talking to pastors here, but it's true in any of your leadership roles. But it ought to be done when you have to deal with those things. It ought to be done out of compassion, empathy, and love for those people, and a desire to make them better. Okay, that's the mind frame where I've missed it. To be honest, I've missed it 1,000 times. I hurt people I didn't have to hurt, taking the right stand in the wrong way. I didn't have Jesus's servant mentality. I was angry. Different times I've been angry at people for things they did, and I handled it in a mean spirit. I was standing for the right. They were wrong and I was right, but I was just as wrong as they were because I didn't handle it correctly. I was angry, and I just wanted, I don't want to say I wanted to hurt them, but I wanted to whip them. I wanted to beat them into subjection. See what I'm saying? That's the mindset. Well, that's the mindset that's taught to a lot of independent Baptist preachers. Just whip a devil out of them. Mean as you can be, all that kind of stuff. Now, you can be straight as a gun barrel, stand for the right things, but do it in the right way, all the while with the attitude of trying to help those people. Are you seeing what I'm saying? It's all about your attitude. If my attitude is, bless goodness, they've messed up and I'm fixing to settle this right here, then I'll make a mess. But if my attitude is, boy, they messed up, but for the grace of God, that could have been me. That could have happened to anybody, and I will try to help them out of this mess they're in, try to guide them here a little bit. See the difference? The end result, the aim is maybe the same, but the difference in the attitude makes all the difference. Makes all the difference. It's a desire to help people and to be a servant unto people. The Bible is full of instruction in that the Lord said again and again, love one another. Love one another. We're encouraged to put up with one another's faults, to find common ground, to not be about confusion. All that's right there in the Bible. That comes from the leader down. So the leader is to give cover from above. Me as the leader of the Concord Baptist Church, I ought to always be interested in covering my people. Doing what's best for my people, adding value to my people. And then underneath, where they're operating at the team level, it's the members of the team, they then support one another. All right, so the leadership's covering from above, and there's this team that's encircled and help one another. Now, I want to talk about that team. See, the leader is only as good as the team. And if you remember from the class where I talked to you about Hal Moore's book on leadership, there's no such bad thing as bad teams, just bad leaders. But the team elevates the leadership. And so we've got to foster for them an atmosphere in which they can do that. That's our job as a leader. And there's 3 words that I want to point out to you, and that is empathy, trust, and belonging. Those are the 3 words that we're going to cover over the next 25 minutes or so here. We're going to cover empathy, trust, and belonging. Okay? These 3 words are key to servant leadership. If you want to make your church, Sunday school, workplace, family, whatever the case may be, a successful team, a successful unit, then you're going to have to employ these 3 things. Let's start with empathy. What does it mean to be empathetic? Well, it means to sympathize, to feel the pain of another. And so servant leadership starts with an empathy. And again, you cannot lead people you're mad at. You've got to try and see it from their point of view. I did most of my field training in law enforcement with Randall Shuford. And Randall had been in law enforcement nearly 30 years. And we'd be out someplace and somebody'd pass us speeding. And I'd fall in behind them, start turning my blue lights on. Randall said, well, wait a minute. He said, maybe they're late for work. He said, you ever been late for work? Run over the speed limit a little bit? I said, yeah. He said, wouldn't it have been a shame if somebody stopped you and made you even later for work? I said, yeah, you're right. Leave them alone. That's empathy, okay? That's seeing it from another's point of view. Now, if we're going to have a church that's healthy, successful, if you're a pastor, you're going to have empathy with your flock. If you're a Sunday school teacher, you're going to have empathy with your class. Not everybody's going to dot every I, cross every T like you do. This is a lesson that it took me probably 18 years in the ministry to learn. Is that not everybody has to do things the way I do them, and that's okay. And at times people are going to mess up because they're people. And when they do mess up, I need to try to put myself in their shoes and think about it like that before I deal with it. That's being empathetic, and that's the basis of servant leadership, is how can I help this person? And you won't think that way unless you put yourself in their shoes and go, what if that was me? How would I want? So number 1 is empathy. Secondly is trust. And trust is earned. You've got to earn the trust of people. We've already talked about that a little bit in this class. But they have to, for a church to be happy and healthy, they have to learn not only to trust you as the overwatch and leadership, but to also trust one another. You think about, and I was reading in this book on Leaders Eat Last about the stress that comes with a workplace where people feel like they cannot trust one another, where there's mistrust among employees. If you've ever worked a job where you didn't trust the people you worked with, you know what I'm talking about. It's very stressful, very stressful. If you add to that poor leadership, it's a powder keg. Well, it's the same with the church. If the people in the church have not formed a circle of trust with one another, and then them together trusting the leadership, boy, it's a stressful situation, and it's very, very dangerous. I read an illustration this week about 4 oxen. There was this lion, and he every day came out and tried to eat the oxen. And those 4 oxen would come in tail to tail, And that lion, no matter where he went, there was horns waiting on him. He could not get into those oxen. Well, something happened. They got in a tussle one day over some grazing land or whatever and got mad at one another, and each one went to his own corner of the pasture. That evening, the lion came in and made a meal out of all 4 oxen because they were no longer together. There's a lot of things that can happen at the church that you can get by with, but division. Once division starts, it's the death rattles of a church. And so they've got to learn, we've got to be able to trust the leadership, and then we've got to be able to trust one another. And there's another story about the Spartans. And my understanding is that to the Spartan, his shield was the most valuable piece of equipment because his shield not only protected himself, but was able to interlock and protect his brethren as well. And so we've got to foster that kind of atmosphere in our churches, in our families, in our workplace. If you're a leader at work, you got to think about, how can I foster the kind of atmosphere where everybody feels like I've got them from the top, and then they've got one another's backs, where they're not backbiting or starting to tear each other down. And actually, it's better for our health. They find that people who are satisfied with their job or satisfied with their church life live longer because it's less stress. So empathy and trust, those things bring, and this is really where I wanted to get to deal with, a sense of belonging. Now, if you've tuned me out for everything else in this class, tune in right here. This is the gold mine, Brother Ryan Hayes, of the whole thing. If you want let me put it this way, a successful church always prioritizes people, and the emphasis is on having a sense of belonging. Let me ask you a question. How many of you ever went to church where you felt like the pastor belonged and the deacons belonged and maybe a certain group of that are in the circle belonged, but nobody else? Everybody else was like they're looking at it from the outside. Maybe a family-run churches where it seemed like a certain family belonged, but everybody else looking at it from the outside. There was no sense of a corporate belonging. Now, in order to put this corporate belonging together, you've got to create an atmosphere. And again, this is true for church, family, jobs. You've got to create an atmosphere where everybody feels like they belong. Everybody. Lowest to highest. And the attitude has to go away from me to we. There's a chief in the fire service that's very famous, and his name is Chief Billy Goldfeder. One time I got to go hear him speak. He's wrote a couple of books. One of the books that he has written is called Pride and Ownership. And he talks about in the fire service how that you got to give the fireman a sense of belonging. It can't just be, I'm the chief and I said so. But it should be a firehouse where everybody's got a job to do, where they have a pride in their rig and they got pride in their fire trucks and they feel a sense of ownership. Now, how do we do that? How do we foster ownership among our people at our church? Well, one way is to delegate to those people some sort of authority, where they feel like they're in some way involved. They feel like that's their church. Nobody ought to feel like about Concord, well, that's Bradley's church, right? People that go there should say, that's my church. This is our church. All right? Still say, this is our church. It's a sense of belonging. It's why Christians throughout the ages have always used the word brother. The word brother indicates a family relationship, and it fosters an ideal of belonging. And so here's what that should look like. It should look like everybody together in a circle of trust. At the members should be in a circle of trust, while there is over them a leadership team that has their best interest in mind. Now let's talk about that leadership team. Well, the pastor and the deacons make up the leadership team. What does the word deacon mean? The word deacon means servant. So those deacons should be in and working on serving the people. What is that? The word preacher, of course, is ecclesiastico. It's a term that means to proclaim. But we're also known as what? Ministers. Ministers. And that means we are to minister unto others. So you've got this leadership team, whatever that looks like, pastors and deacons who have the interest of the people in mind. The people are together in a circle of trust, both of one another and of the leadership team. That is creating an atmosphere of belonging. Now, I'm telling you, it's where it's at in church growth. If you want your church to grow spiritually, financially, and numerically, then there's got to be a sense of belonging among the people. They cannot feel like they are spectators looking in. Same with a Sunday school class. Same with a business. Same with a family. Nobody can feel like they're a spectator watching, but instead they've got to feel like they are some way involved, that they have a sense of community and sense of belonging within the church. Now let's talk about some basic ways that we can do that, okay? How can we foster a sense of belonging? Well, one way is to identify strengths in people. For instance, we've got a boy and girl that's been coming to our church, and we discovered she can really sing. And so I'm using her a lot to sing specials. That gives her a sense of belonging. That's her church. She belongs there. If I discover that someone's got a knack for teaching, then I'll try to find them a Sunday school class to teach after they've shown themselves faithful. That fosters, they got to, just simple something as working on a particular day, or helping, making sure that they're there. If we have work days, making sure they're there. Hey, we'd love for you to be here. They get there, put them in charge of doing something. That way they've got some pride, they've got some ownership, they've got a sense of belonging within the church, and they feel like they're a part of it. That is very crucially important, and it's part of this whole style of servant leadership that we want to focus on. And like I said, I'll probably focus on it again next week when we talk about this next section on the law of solid ground, because a servant leader has to have some solid ground to stand on. I'm trying to think of let's think about the book of Acts real quick. I got just a minute, maybe 5 minutes. Let's think about the book of Acts just a minute. In the early church, the Bible said they had all things common. All right, they trusted one another to the point that they sold all their goods and dispersed to the needs of the people. So they trusted one another, and they trusted their leadership. They had a sense of belonging. They had a sense of ownership. Those things are vital, and the only way that you can instill that in your people is by being a servant leader. A servant leader. Not a leader that looks down your nose, pops a whip, but adapts the style of servant leadership. God help me. God help me to adapt a style. That's my desire, to adapt a style of servant leadership. Well, I'm to the end of my notes. So if I keep on going, it's just me rambling. I don't want this to be me rambling. I want every minute of this class to be packed with information that you can use. So 35 minutes. We're going to let you out early. And the next 3 weeks are going to be, you just got to put up with me getting these posted whenever I can. Next Tuesday night, I'm preaching in a tent meeting out at the Pleasant Hill Baptist Church, in tent meeting. And so we look forward to that. That following week, we're having revival at our church. And then the week after that, I'm preaching in a revival. So the next 3 weeks, I'm pretty tied up. So don't fault me if I'm a day or two late getting videos posted. We'll try to get them out. God bless you. See you next time.